little bit of background. I was on a school board, Los Alamitos Unified School District. That's the district that I live in, my wife and I. I was on the school board for 12 years. A couple of years ago, I got unelected as a result of the union not liking some of my efforts to change what was going on within the school. And if you ask me about it, I can give you some details. But the good news, although I was certainly upset when it happened, I lost by like 15 votes or something, that it was a blessing in disguise because it gave me an opportunity to open up a charter school. And as many of you may know, my wife, Mary, is on the County Board of Education. And during her candidacy, I connected with a guy named Mark Bucher that many of you know. And he's been involved in education for many, many years. And he always had a dream of starting a classical education K through 12 school that his own kids could attend. It never worked out. His kids are older. And we were sitting around one day, we're talking about Mary's race, and this came up. And my son, my wife and my son attended Hillsdale College, which is in the middle of Michigan. Hillsdale College many, many years ago was given some seed money by a guy named Stephen Barney. And Stephen Barney gave Hillsdale money to start charter schools throughout the country. And those charter schools are called the Barney Charter School Initiative. And there's 24 of them in 10 states. And in talking with Mark Bucher, I said, well, why don't we be the first in California? And through a series of events, and in no small part, Ceci and company and Mary helped rally support to get Orange Unified to pass our petition to start a charter school. And we did that and started this past August. So we're K through 5, our goal is K through 12. We're gonna add a grade every year until we're K through 12. We have 2 classes for every grade. And we were nervous. I've never done this before, neither had Mark. We didn't really know what we were doing, actually. But we surrounded ourselves with some really good people to help us and a little divine intervention. And we hired some terrific folks to help run our school, and we opened. And to everybody's surprise, especially the Orange Unified School District, who hates us, our school is full. We are at capacity. And we've had over 1,000 people enter our waiting list and our interest list that want to join our school. It's very sad to me because almost every day we have a parent call, usually a mom, and usually who's crying, wanting to know if there's room at our school for their child. And unfortunately, we are literally at capacity. Next year, we'll add another grade and we'll continue to grow. And maybe, just maybe, we'll open additional schools. Most of the parents that are coming to us are either previous homeschool parents that really don't like to homeschool their kids. They did so because they feel obligated to because of the unfortunate situations in many of the traditional public schools that you all know about, from the indoctrination that happens in the classroom to the sex ed garbage that's being taught to our kids. To the very poor academic performance in most of the schools in Southern California, heck, in California. Some of these schools have the most beautiful football fields and baseball fields you'd ever see, but the kids can't read or write at grade level or do math at grade level. So our parents and our kids are coming from homeschools. They're coming from private Christian or religious schools. They're used to paying $15,000 or $20,000 a year, and now they have an opportunity to come to a free public charter school that has a value system similar to them. Our motto is homeschool values in a traditional setting. And if you go to our website, orangecountyclassicalacademy.org, you'll see we are a proud American school. We believe in the Judeo-Christian principles of our founders. We do not apologize for Western civilization. And that is attracting students to our school more so than we ever knew would happen. When we first got chartered, we were panicking that where we're going to find kids to come to our schools. Mark Bucher's daughter and his daughter's friend were home from college on the summer, and we put together some brochures. One panel was in Spanish that Ceci helped us with, and they started canvassing our local neighborhood in perimeters around our school. And about 2 weeks later, we had to pull them off and stop them because the response was overwhelming, and we were having difficulty keeping up with all the kids that wanted to be at our school. From a COVID standpoint, I based our strategy really on the science, not on politics, not on anything else. And what I know as a physician about the science is that kids are at very, very, very low risk from this disease. If you look at the CDC's own statistics, and the way to do that is if you just Google COVID deaths by age, CDC, you can get this information. And there's not a lot of kids that have died from COVID. And more importantly, if you're less than 20 years old, so that's basically K through 12, if you get this virus, you have literally a 99.997% survival from this virus. And it's hard to even know what that means. The number is so small or large from a survival standpoint. But to put things in perspective, relative to COVID, if you're less than 20, you have a higher risk of dying in a motor vehicle accident. So a kid driving to school is at greater risk than coming to school and getting COVID. You have a higher risk of drowning in a pool over the summer or the ocean than you do from dying from COVID, and a greater risk of being struck by lightning and dying than you do from COVID. So if you just put the context of the risk to kids and understand that the risk to a child is almost worth ignoring. When a child gets COVID, typically they either have no symptoms or really mild symptoms, and they recover quite quickly. Yet here we are I just got an email about an hour ago from Los Alamitos Unified that they're reverting to full distance learning, and they're not going to open again until the middle of January. And they even acknowledged the superintendent, who I know well, Andrew Culver. I consider him a friend. He's a relatively conservative guy. He even acknowledged that COVID is very little risk. We haven't really seen a lot of outbreaks, but because we're seeing some outbreaks within the community, that therefore better safe than sorry kind of thing. And unfortunately, what too many people don't do is they look at risk-benefit trade-offs. And the trade-off of doing distance learning is not benign. It's devastating. So we see suicide rates high in children. You may have read, it's been a couple, 3 weeks, that an 11-year-old up in Ladero Ranch killed themselves during a Zoom meeting. We see depression at the highest level we've seen in, I can't remember when, in children. Not to mention the effect this has on parents, because obviously, if you're doing distance learning and you've got a third or fourth grader, they can't be home by themselves. Somebody has to be home with them. And typically, especially in the lower economic households, both parents are working. And now a parent has to figure out how to stay home. And it's devastating for those families. In my office, we have relatively young nurses, and we've allowed our nurses to bring their kids to the office. We have a big conference room. They can sit in the conference room. We rotate kind of chaperoning them and keeping an eye on them. And they can have their computer up and pretend like they're actually learning in our conference room, so the parents can go to work rather than have to miss work and stay at home. So we base our ability to open on the science. The argument always has been, well, okay, it's not a risk for the students, but what about the little kids spreading this disease to an at-risk adult? What about that? And the reality is there's been study after study that shows there is almost no risk of a kid spreading the disease, especially that are asymptomatic, to an at-risk adult. As a matter of fact, the teachers have a greater risk in the lunchroom or the teacher's lounge than they do in the classroom. And if you use just common sense in the classroom, good hygiene, cleaning the classrooms really well, if you want to distance the teacher from the kids, okay, that makes sense, maybe. Distancing the kids from each other, That makes zero sense at all because the kids are relatively immune to this. So that's basically what we did. And early on, we applied to the Orange County Health Department for a waiver, and they granted us a waiver. So even when California, when our tyrannical governor decides to close down the schools, if you have a waiver, you can stay open. You have to follow the rules of the waiver, which quite frankly, I don't agree with. And that is, even children now as young as 5 years old are required to wear masks. And personally, I think that's a form of child abuse. We do have some parents within our school that have gotten mask exemptions, and we accept those, but most of the kids still have to wear masks. So, our families are brave, and they would rather have their kid in school with the restrictions, mask wearing and so forth, than not have their kids. And so we do the best we can. When kids are out on the playground or PE or recess, they don't have to wear a mask. So that's the good news. So we do the best we can. So I believe, in my opinion, that all schools should be open, period. And that obviously each school is unique with their own circumstances, with their own age base of their teachers. So if a teacher is at high risk and they're older and they have significant underlying conditions, maybe that teacher could stay home. But the vast majority of teachers are relatively young and they're very safe. So this is really being driven by the unions, not by the parents and not by the kids. So it's the unions that are forcing and putting pressure on the school districts to stay closed. And when they don't, they march and they threaten to strike and so forth. So one of the advantages, and Austin knows this, and I know he's working in the LA area in trying to create solutions, is the advantage of a charter school is most charter schools are not unionized. So we don't have the pressure of unions telling us what to do. We can work directly with the teachers and the families to craft solutions to whatever we're trying to accomplish. And the good news too, if there is good news in this crazy COVID time, is, as I've told you, we've got 1,000-person interest list. We have parents calling us every day that want to get into our school. We're seeing a mass exodus from traditional schools. And even after COVID, I don't think a lot of these people are coming back to traditional schools. I think this is the straw that broke the camel's back. So these parents are either going to homeschool, and more people than ever are doing that, or they're going to find a private school, or they're going to find a charter school that has similar values as they do, which is one of the reasons why we want to expand what we're doing and open up multiple charter schools, because there's clearly a need for it, to have charter schools that have a different model of education than a traditional model. And our model is that of a classical education, whatever that is, and I can explain it if you want. The best description I've ever heard of what classical education is it is the education that our founders received. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, classical education and the model for classical education has been the norm for hundreds of years in this country. And it's really only over the last 50 or 75 years that this change to a more progressive indoctrination concept has taken over. And the results, not my opinion, the results are clear. In California, approximately 50% of the African American community cannot do math at grade level. To me, that's just unacceptable. That's criminal. And if you have a charter school that's failing kids, that charter school goes out of business. If you have a traditional school that's failing kids, that school never goes out of business, and the unions just whine and complain that they want more money to feed into it. So I think school choice is really the answer, and charter schools is part of that answer, at least here in California. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. You all, most of you probably know this, but I think it's important to state. I'm a board member and a founder of this charter school. I don't make a penny. The board does not get any type of a stipend. We don't get paid in any way. We don't get health insurance. We get no benefits whatsoever. Contrast that with a elected school board member. When I was an elected school board member, we'd get a stipend. I can't even remember. It's a couple, $300-400 a month. and would get a very valuable benefit of health insurance. So charter schools get less money from the state than traditional schools, and board members are participating purely voluntarily out of the love and desire to really try to make a difference. And I've been accused of wanting my school to open for financial reasons for myself or my wife, and that's just a blatant lie. I get no financial benefit. Believe me, it's a time suck, but it is a passion and a joy of my life to be able to put a school on that kids love going to and parents are passionate about.